Stage down.
Hey!
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much. I'll see you later. Right, quick question for you. How many of here are wargamers? I'm going to set the right, okay. We're all there, right. And how many here like sci-fi? Still have hands up, come on. Excellent. Some of my talk will be relevant more to sci-fi people. Some will be more relevant to wargamers and will understand a bit more. But it's always handy knowing which side you're now and how I can sort of sway it towards the larger majority. Who remembers when Jurassic Park came out?
Yeah.
Do you remember the main artist or main FX artist working on it was Phil Tippett? Quite famous, did quite a few of the Star Wars movies. They brought him in to do a lot of the stop animation pieces and the robotic parts of the movie, and then showed him what they were doing on 3D rendering for the rest of the movie. And he came up with quite a famous saying, which they then put into the movie later and went, "Oh my God, I'm now extinct." And they then added it in and had Dr. Grant saying it in the movie because they had now brought dinosaurs to life and they no longer needed archaeologists. In relevance, 3D rendering, which is now coming into the wargaming industry and model industry, a lot of people have been saying that traditional sculptors like myself are going to be pretty much extinct because of the way that they can now do 3D rendering and using rapid prototypers. To be honest, I think that the market itself will always have a position for both types of sculpting. Now, the rapid prototypers which are currently available at the moment don't actually necessarily can do everything that a traditional sculptor can do, because the rapid prototypers can't actually cut in all the places that a traditional sculptor can just make an arm and not have an undercut, whereas a rapid prototyper wouldn't be able to cut out everything underneath without taking off other detail. So as far as 3D rendering goes, it's coming on and has come on quite a way from what the traditional was, where you would be able to take straight shapes. You can now do very three-dimensional shapes. I saw a beautiful one last month of, say beautiful, it doesn't really fit with the character it was, but Brock Lesnar, the MMA fighter, somebody had done a 3D rapid prototype of one of his pictures, and then a professional painter had painted it all up. Looked amazing and looked very much like the original person, which was all done from a rapid prototype over a traditional sculpting. But as the person who painted it said, there is still going to be a place in the market for a traditional sculptor.
Can you also do, more like the movie industry, they get someone like you to make the original sculpture as a maquette, and then you scan that.
That's right.
And then do 3D printing of it.
That's it. They still do that today.
That's modern technology, but they've got you as stage one.
That's it. They're still using that today.
Yeah.
Even people like George Lucas, who obviously on his last 3 Star Wars movies did massive amounts of 3D rendering on it, still uses traditional modelers to make up some of the basics, which they then scan into the computer again.
Yeah.
So I think for at least another 50 years at least, there's still going to always be a need for traditional sculptors as well as 3D renderers. A 3D rendering artist, he's still an artist, he's just using a different format. They're still building up a living piece in digital form, which is still then got to be printed out. They're then still coming back to traditional sculptors again to actually then say, oh, instead of doing a 3D render, we'll actually have a traditional sculptor sculpt it, then stick it for a 3D imager, and then print it out afterwards. So it's still very mishmash at the moment. They're not actually going, yes, we must use this one, or no, we're going to use this one, or we're going to use this one. It's becoming a giant moulding pot.
You're talking about the 3D printers that, for example, the one on the news recently where the guy was building a goat.
Yes,
That's
yes.
Oh, right.
Yeah, there's a chap in the other room, the guy up in the back corner. He's got some 3D printers of a Defiant.
Have you seen these printers?
Oh, George.
Yeah.
George has a lot of 3D printing.
Yeah, he's got little runabouts as well, hasn't he,
Yeah.
that are sort of no longer than 2 mil. So traditional sculptor like me sits there for ages trying to do this, whereas he just goes, prints it out and it's done. So there's definitely advantages to having a 3D printer doing some things, especially when it comes to straight edges. For myself, sitting there sculpting up straight edges in anything smaller than 6 mil scale is a nightmare. Oh man.
There's also
I can't see the TV for the next 2 hours. But it's definitely a process that I'm looking forward to seeing more of it develop. But I'm not worried that I'm going to be out of work anytime soon. Completely lost my catching this from you, I'm losing my train of thought now. But even in the movie industry, they're still actually using traditional masks on a lot of the movies now.
Yeah.
And I believe they're talking about the next Star Wars movie now, actually taking out a lot of 3D imaging on it and going back to traditional like they did on the first three movies. So the guys who are coming into the 3D world and doing all this 3D rendering, they're saying, we're going to be pushing all these guys out. I really don't see that happening for any time soon. In fact, I'm probably getting busier these days than I was a year ago. Yes, sir?
About your point about the next Star Wars, actually, the last two reboots of Star Trek, that he insisted that they do as much real life as possible
Yeah.
before they get loose with computers.
Yes. Yeah, I think a lot of filmmakers have become very lazy in the fact that they just go, right, we'll make this tiny bit here and we pay these actors and then we just pay the 3D renderers to go and do everything else and then hope that they get a movie out of it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, Avatar worked. Personally, I love the film. I thought it was a great way of actually showing that human beings, sometimes we can be a little bit nasty and actually think everything is ours.
Isn't that normally the case?
Yeah, pretty much. If you go for history, so, you know. And I think in movies, it's still very much a 50-50 split on where they need to go. I mean, Avatar, trying to get somebody to actually act that out in the two different heights that they would have needed would have been very difficult. Obviously, they used actors and then 3D rendered their faces afterwards. Actually trying to do costumes to make their faces change that much would have been slightly impossible. But then with some of the Star Wars characters, which they've done in 3D rendering, they could have easily done them with guys in suits. I think it comes down to producers and actors on what they actually decide is going to be best at the time. Yeah, and monies as well. Unfortunately, in the modelling industry as well, it's quite often a case of, do we go for a traditional sculptor who's going to cost this much, or do we go for a 3D print that's going to cost this much? Depending on what they need, and quite often the cost. I get one of my clients in America, he recently did a project which I did all the figures for, and he must have had 10 people approach him afterwards about doing sculpting for him for his next project. Some were 3D renderers, some were traditional sculptors like myself, and luckily enough he turned around and said, no thanks, I'm going to stick with Dave, it's all right. Which I was quite pleased about, because he's got 3 projects lined up already. Keep me busy. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be any time soon before it kills off another part of the art industry. Model making, traditional model making of spaceships is still going on, which they're 3D rendering afterwards, but they still have that modeler to make it in the first place. Does anyone have any questions on that bit? Oh, yes.
Do you have any favourite projects?
Any favourite projects built? Ones that pay me money? No. No. My favourite's got to be sci-fi stuff. I like doing fantasy stuff. But to be honest, I just like modelling. Even doing traditional stuff, I did some Afghans for a company last year. It was quite an interesting project because I got to see what's the movie first. And then build a model sculpting. So, did kind of wear out my balls a little bit, but it was fine. Got a replacement, it's not fun. But no, it's the modelling side for me. I've always been into art, and any form of art I could get my hands on. So when I was at school I did traditional art and technical drawing, which everyone, all my teachers were going, you don't do both, you do one or the other. You like do curves or you do straight lines, which is, I want to do both. I both.
It's combined, you
That's
can't separate them.
No.
Art is every shape and colour and contour you want.
Exactly. You know, sometimes I may want to use a ruler, sometimes I may want to draw free. If I know how to do both, I'm not limited. And I think in art at the moment it's very limiting. They try to pigeonhole you.
That's a big mistake. You need as broad a palette
Yes.
as you can possibly.
I think art and technical drawing should be combined as a subject, and you have to learn both.
Is that because the snobbery is sort of, if you're making a living from it, it's all this commercial rubbish? I mean, it's not proper art.
Also
Yeah.
with schooling, it's how can we judge this?
Yeah.
And art is something really hard to judge anyway.
Yeah, so you
You know, to one person, they may like Salvador Dali's work. To another person, they may hate it. Because it's subjective, everybody has a different opinion on art. I hate, art-wise, 3 splashes of paint on a piece of paper. It's like, why? I could pay a monkey to do that, and it would cost me peanuts. In fact, they did, just to prove an art critic wrong. They got a monkey to actually, with some paint, splash it all over, stuck it up in a gallery with a proper frame around it, and said to this critic, what do you think of this? And he spent ages going over about the passion behind the brushstrokes, and oh, he's really trying to convey this depth and disparity, and they went, would you like to meet the artist? And he said, yes, and they brought out the monkey. I was very embarrassed.
I remember watching that, was on TV.
Yeah, it was. It was quite amazing.
Big spoof.
I spend a lot of time looking at other people's art. People say, yeah, but you do your own. Just because I do my own doesn't mean I'm not inspired by others.
It's not just sci-fi stuff you do otherwise.
I do lots of all sorts. I've been asked to draw erotica stuff for people before. I've done body casting. Yes, it's always difficult doing body casting because you have to make sure that the partners are there so they know everything's safe.
What is body casting?
What is body casting? It's literally taking apart the human anatomy, taking a cast of it, and then from that mould, actually re-rendering it. I render mine in fiberglass, and then they have it as a piece of art on their wall. There's hands, feet, other body parts, mostly other body parts. Yes, torsos is the best description of torsos. Which is why I always ask partners to be there, because they can be the one putting on JLE art beforehand. Safe.
So do you augment
Sometimes it depends on what they're looking for. A lot of the time, you sometimes get them wanting couples together. Now, casting a couple together is difficult, but possible, as long as they listen. Doesn't always happen. I spent many hours trying to explain to one couple of, if you put your arm in this position, and then she has her arm in this position, there's too many gaps and it will break. No, we want to do it that way. Yes, but it will break. You won't get a mold out of it. But this is what we want. Yeah, but if you just move your arm here, which is still giving you the effect you want, we'll be able to take a mold of it, and it's not going to cost you money where you won't get anything. Wouldn't listen, and we had to make 2 molds, funnily enough, because the first one broke. Even though I put extra bandages in it to try and make sure that it wouldn't. It's a bit of a weird one, and luckily enough I don't do too much of it. It's one of those things that crops up occasionally. Somebody goes, oh, I hear you do this. And you go, yes.
Where do you
What?
get displayed?
I have a website where I do all of my sculpting work. It goes on there. As long as the clients that I sculpt for say it's okay for me to put pictures up. Some don't like me showing it because they don't want anybody else to know that the army they're using was made by somebody else. I'm quite like that at desk scale. It's fine.
So, what would you say is your most challenging and at the same time fulfilling piece?
Most challenging and fulfilling piece.
It is two, then.
No, probably one of the ones in my cabinet actually. It's a character called Teto Echo, which is a Lizardman player who's on a floating throne. And I wanted it to actually look like it was floating without using one of these clear plastic bases. So I made a base that's actually got a brass rod running through it and into the floating throne. So it looks like it's floating past the tree. And you, as long as you're not looking in one particular angle, you can't actually see the brass bar. So, but that was the most fulfilling and probably the most challenging to try and get the effect that I was looking for. But then any model that you make can be a challenge. Something as simple as make me this specific person and it's got to have this specific face.
Yeah.
And then it needs to be in 28mm scale.
Yeah.
So you're taking a picture that's like this size and trying to make a head that's no bigger than that look like that picture.
Chap coming the other day,
Yes.
you were asking about that.
It's difficult,
Yeah.
but then if everybody could do it, everybody would be doing my job. So
Yeah, maybe you can play the check.
yeah.
What's the most unusual thing you've done?
Most unusual thing I've done. Yeah, it would probably have to be one of the body parts on the position the lady actually wanted to do. Yeah, it was, yeah.
Brazilian.
I probably know more than her gynecologist does.
Cheapest Brazilian chair around.
Definitely, no. Trodium jelly over it so that no hairs get pulled. Because the human body hair is quite hairy, even if they're little fine hairs, they hurt more. I know, I tested my arm the first time I did it. It was quite sore for about a month.
Several miles away.
That's it. But yes, that's probably the most challenging, to actually try and get that right. And then having to actually rework the cast because the plaster didn't go into it necessarily all the right folds. So afterwards, actually having to re-carve it back out again. So, yeah, definitely interesting. Luckily, I have a very understanding wife. She's always there with me, so that she knows nothing goes on. She can do the charity jelly. I don't like it. Does anybody else have questions?
Have you got a preferred scale and period for sculpting, and is that different to scale and period you like actually gaming?
I prefer the 28mm to larger scaling on modelling because that means I can actually get more detail in. I try to do as much detail as I can on 6mm.
Without going blind?
Without going blind, and without getting casters really shouting at me for destroying their moulds every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Like Games Workshop did for the first ones I made for them. They said,
When it means such detail, you've got like little handfuls you use.
yeah, I use the same tools all the time on whichever scale I'm using. I have one sculpting tool, which is a Taranti SG. I have a couple of different shaped skeletal blades, and I have a needle, and that's it. That's all I use on sculpting. I see many sculptors going, oh yes, I have 35 different tools here, and then I have 35 of this one here, and I go, all right, I have this one. And a couple of sculpting blades that I have lying around, and that's it. And they're like, yeah, but how do you do those folds there? You must use a clay shaper. That's what sculpting does. I just do that bit. It's different preferences. Each person builds up their own preferences on what they like to use. I'm lazy. I don't like having loads of tools lying around because I'm terrible and I never put them away. So having a mountain of tools means I would have no desk space. Having one tool means I can still see my split desk space. Yes, sir. Oh, right, no problem. Yeah, I know. We also from it today. But yeah, it's scale I prefer gaming in, probably 6mm, because I can have a huge, massive setup with a really small gaming table. In fact, I've got a 6x4 gaming table in my dining room set up all the time when I can get to it, when it's not covered in everything else that I'm working on. So it means if I'm using 6mm scale, I can have a massive battle across the whole 6x4. But I still like playing 28mm and 54, pretty much gaming anything.
Do you do for machination like other artists, or do you have to have some sort of design?
Right, I do both. I do some stuff which is my imagination, and some of the bits which I do, at the moment I'm actually creating up a whole gaming system. So I'm having to develop all the different races in it, all the different characters that are in it, and that's all coming from me. I'll also do work from pictures, and I also have done it with text as well. I've had a couple of clients who said, here's a piece of text, make me a model. Okay, what's your ideas on what it should look like? No, just you make a model from that piece of text.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Yeah, no, people, other designers want to think that monthly say this is what they look like now.
Yes, yeah. The one I did recently for Alien Uprising, that was all artist renditions, and then I had to make a 3D model of the artist renditions,
Yeah.
which was quite interesting. They were thinking I could get so many of the details that they had in the picture, and I surprised them when they had individual teeth on all the aliens. So give the caster something to think about. That's not my problem. It's not my big department.
What's the largest, smallest model you've got?
Largest, smallest model I've worked on.
In scale?
In scale. I've got a dragon I'm building at the moment for modern display products that's 50 centimetres long with a 40 centimetre wingspan. Yeah, I made my dragon with proper size wings, not those little bitty ones that don't look like they can fly. I'm very lucky with that particular client. He says, wing size, do what you think is right. Cool. Well, how I think it should look. So that's the biggest one I've done.
That's supposed to be metric scale to
28mm scale. So
big.
quite long. The largest human-sized one is 70mm mermaid I've made, which was quite an interesting piece. It was one I came up with the idea for. It's a mermaid leaning over a rock pool, playing with the water, but we're casting up her evil reflection as well in clear resin, so that you've got, when the face is placed just right.
Is that on your website?
It's not on my website yet.
So you've got the face in the resin?
We've got the face in the resin coming back up, but it's an evil version of her where it's more fish-like and great big long spiny teeth and horrible in this. It's quite a nice one. It's off of the casters at the moment, but it's coming back because unfortunately the normal head got broken in the moulding process, so we've got to redo it. But it's fine. It's better to get it right now than release a hard substandard product. Because the casting we've got is very good. He actually started 4 tools casting before they went and bought it all in-house. He's now got his own casting facility. We get all our casting done from him.
As a hobby model,
Yes.
I would find that the sort of thing where you do a bespoke item and then have to go back over it, utterly shattering. How do you deal with that as a professional?
As a professional, I guess it's suck it up, get on with it, because otherwise you never get any money from it anyway. It can be frustrating, especially if you make a really nice model, you send your picture to the client to okay it, and they go, it's nice, but could you just change this? And you go, yes, of course, no problem. What's he talking about? Go do the changes, send him the picture and goes, yeah, that's great. Could you just change this? Yes, of course, no problem.
You won't be 10
And proceed down the line, and 4 or 5 renderings later, and they go, I think we're about right. I'll think about it over the weekend. You do that. Don't click the post. But no, at the end of the day, the client's got to be happy with it. Yeah, the client's always right. It can be frustrating. Yes, you can think of them in wonderful forms afterwards, but you've got to be professional. If that's what they want, that's what they want. It's frustrating, yes, but otherwise, what do? You go find another job.
They've got a picture in their head, what they think it should look like.
That's it. Unless they can actually portray that picture to you, you're always going to have your rendition of what they're telling you until they can then go, that's what I'm looking for, but it needs this, and this. Right, okay. Now I know what you're looking for, that's great. If you have clients who have only tell you the next bit that they thought of, and then wait until you've done that bit before they tell you the next bit that they thought of, and then the next bit that they thought of, it can get very frustrating. But it's one of those things you just go, right, okay, that's what we want, no problem, I'll get on with it, I'll get on. Sometimes it actually adds to the cost of the model for them, because what they've originally told you is sort of this size, and then it ends up being something of great big monstrosity this size. Well, it's going to be more expensive. You know, if they want to keep adding to it, then they've got to pay for it. If it's something I've done wrong, I will do that, and I won't charge them any more for it. If it's something they want to add to it, then it comes with an additional charge. At the end of the day, they've got to be happy, I've got to make a living, and I don't want to try and rip them off. I've had models go to people, they've said it was fine, and then they've had additional clients that have looked at it and gone, it's not quite what we're looking for, can you change this? Yes. How much extra is it going to cost? Nothing. Because it's not what you want. I didn't change it. And I've changed it and sent it back to them. Yeah, a lot of people say, we should charge them for these alterations. Why? Because it's not what they wanted in the first place. The fact that the second client didn't get to see it until after they got it, that's not the original client's fault. So I'm not going to charge them extra for it. I don't work that way. I'd rather have good customer service and people coming back than ripping people off.
Plus, it also gives you a very high quality reputation that you're an honest goal.
Yeah, yeah. You know, if somebody says, this model's not what I'm looking for, a lot of modelers out there will turn around and go, well, that's what you've paid for, that's what you get. I hear horror stories of it all the time, and it's like, really? People actually still order stuff from you? I don't understand it. I always try to make sure that people get exactly what they're after. Yes, I may undercut myself quite often, but then I do it not just for the money, I do it for the love of doing it. Keeps me sane, well, as sane as I can possibly be. I wouldn't say I was massively sane. Yes?
Sorry, I've got a complete newbie question.
No problem.
What material do you model in?
A product called Green Stuff, which is also known as Needite. Needite is its technical name. Green Stuff is the common name that most people use for it. And the reason it's called Green Stuff is it comes in two parts. It's an epoxy putty, half blue, half yellow, and when you mix it together it turns green. Hence Green Stuff. It was originally developed for plumbers because it sets underwater. And it was used for fixing leaks. And then some sculptor many years ago went, oh, look at this, I can make this with this. And it's all worked up from there. There's a lot of products on the market. You've got things like Milliput if you want something really hard. Sculpting if you don't mind cooking in it. What's the other one? Procreate is another one which people, Fimo, yes. I've used Sculpting in the past for large scenery pieces. I've used Milliput for blocking out because I don't find I can get the detail with it that I can get with Green Stuff. But then other artists use different mediums. It's whatever you find happy with. I used to use Milliput years ago and couldn't get on with Green Stuff until I persevered with it and then thought, why have I ever been using Milliput? You know, Green Stuff's so much better. It's a learning process, I think, with a lot of it.
And does that mean you scope with different materials? Because I thought you just sort of like like plaster Paris, that sort of stuff.
Oh, right, yeah. The plaster of Paris is when doing body casting. Green stuff is when I'm sculpting models. Mini-put and Sculpting I use when I'm doing scenery pieces. I suppose a lot of the mediums I use all depends on the project I'm using. I don't try to narrow myself to limiting myself to this is what I use and this is only what I'll ever use.
Does that mean that some project it's easier to sculpt a certain material?
Yes, yes. It all depends on the job, especially sizes. Sculpting a large model like that,
Yeah.
if I try to do it in green stuff, I'll probably get through about 8 packs of it. And at £7 a pack, it sort of starts bumping up the cost. Whereas I can do the main bulk of the model in Sculpting, cook it off when it goes hard, and then do all the detailing in green stuff. And I can do that in 1 pack of Sculpting.
Well, I suppose, as well.
Yes, yeah, it keeps the cost down. Because I never quote the client the materials cost, I just quote them the time. The materials cost is so small on the models normally that it doesn't really come into it. If I've got a pack of green stuff which is 36 inches of lead out, I can probably make about 50 or 60 28mm scale models out of it. I can probably make 1 set of dragon wings out of a pack. But then that's because I'm having to double side them to actually get all the texture on it. I use lots of different formers as well. Like I have this red watering can which I actually went to Wilkinson to buy specifically to make dragon wings. It's got a beautiful curve on it, so I can actually use the curve to make the basic shape of the dragon wing, and then peel it off and then do the other side and get all the texture on it. Simple solutions.
Are the materials expensive? Do they vary like that?
They vary. Also, it varies on where you get them from. I get my green stuff from a company called Silmaster. They seem to be the cheapest I found in Britain for it. And they don't charge you extra if you order like multiple packs on postage. So I order 5 packs at a time and pay 1 on postage. And normally get through the 5 packs within about 2 months. Depending usually if I'm busy that month. That's what so far I have been. I haven't got to a standing order yet, but close, but not quite.
Is there any subjects that you sort of go, oh God, I never want to sculpt one of those again, not another orc or not another kind of, cavalry
Not
officer
so
or
much.
whatever?
Historical ones are difficult
Yeah.
because when you come to historical modelling, you have a set formula. It has to be this. It has to have the right belt buckle. It has to have the right buttons to it. It has to have the buttons in the right places. It has to have the certain banding marks, and it can become very fiddly and time-consuming. I'm very time-consuming on research. And then you also have to check the validity of the research as well. You know, I found a picture for somebody who wanted an American particular cavalryman. Thought I'd found the right picture, said it was the right picture, made the model, and then he went, oh, that's so-and-so. It's not so this one. This one actually has this, 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 and this. And I've got, right, okay, no problem. I'll just choose that. So historical stuff is quite difficult because it is very specific.
Yeah.
And if you get historical wargamers, that one over there, one shade colour of blue can stop people from actually playing it. It's that difficult, you know. It's what I try to steer clear of as much as possible, but
It's
you
like
know, work's
wargaming,
work.
but with the sense of humour in it.
That's it, yes. Very serious. Imagine a cold, dank, dusty room full of cobwebs and 2 old guys sat in a corner. That's probably historical wargaming. I have done painting in the past. I don't do as much painting now due to the fact of I had a car accident and I've got fibromyalgia, so trying to actually sit and paint now is very painful. If I can manage 20 minutes in a week, I'm lucky. So sculpting, I can curl up in a nice little ball in the corner of my sofa and sit there quite happily sculpting.
Painting, you found somebody else who
Yeah, there's a client I've just done a big army for. He's paid me to do all his sculpting work, and then he's painted artists to do all of his painting work. So, but he's one of the clients who asked me not to show the models, so he was obviously going to pass it off as his work when they takes it to the tournament, which is fine, you know. It'd be fine when somebody asks him to replicate it.
Morally dubious, I would say, rather than fine.
Definitely.
Have you ever met the artist that's painted the product you painted?
No, because this is an American client, so
I'm just in general.
in general, yes, I know quite a few of the different company artists.
Yeah.
So the first salute show I ever did, several of them came across and said, "Oh, we can paint your models better than that one in there, which I painted." And I'm like, "Oh, that's very nice, but I sculpt, I don't paint models, so I don't need them painted, thanks very much." The fact that that one was actually a quick job, which I did for a friend, just because his level of painting was a lot lower than mine, and he wanted that as his centerpiece, but I had to tie it in with the rest of his army so it didn't stand out completely. You know, it looked like a nice character model, but didn't blow it out of the water and think, well, the rest of the army's rubbish, why isn't everything like that one? It was a Christmas gift I built it. It's actually one of the ones which is in my cabinet with the painted neck on Lord. I built it, and then he had said about painting it, so I painted it for him as well as a Christmas present. And, yeah, but you know, a lot of it's very funny in the industry. You get some people that are very arrogant about certain aspects, and I just go, it's fine. You know, at the end of the day, if you're happy doing what you're doing, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. If there's space for all of us, well, we're in. You know, I'm not trying to take their business on painting. I haven't got the time to do it.
You've seen about some of the media you've been given to sculpt. So if somebody send you a photo,
Yeah.
could you sculpt off that?
Yes.
I need to talk about a certain character.
Okay, no problem. But yes,
Something to do with black armour and lots of.
yeah, that's easily done. Yeah, we get photographs, we get pictures, we get dubious pencil line sketches of this is what I would like, and you look at it and you go, that doesn't actually even look human. How the hell am I supposed to work from this? Okay. Just tell me what it is you're thinking you've drawn me, and I'll just draw in the lines and send you a picture back.
So it's a descriptive text?
Yeah, so I've had descriptive text before. Descriptive text is subjective, because obviously what I read it as and what you read it as would probably be two different things.
Yeah.
But they did it on purpose so that they would get my rendition of it. Yes. Which was like, yeah, so how do you read it? No, how do it as you read it. Fine, okay, well, that's great. I can do anything I want then. So I quite enjoyed doing that one. It wasn't a piece that they were actually going to release. They just wanted to see my rendition of it, because they've done the same with several other artists to see what they were actually going to do. Apparently mine was the most creative. It's cool.
Not necessarily a good thing.
Not necessarily a good thing.
That's good or bad, it's also subjective.
Did you get the contract?
Yes, I did.
And that's what counts.
Yeah. They said, you seem to have a very vivid imagination. And I went, yeah. They went, how many ideas do you get a day? What, on a bad day or a good day? And they were like, oh, on a bad day, probably about 200. And they were like, you have 200 ideas floating around in a day? Yes. So what about on a good day? Probably about 1,000. And they're like, really, you come up with 1,000 concepts in a day? Yes. Why is that? I don't sleep. I have to have something to keep me going in the wee hours of the morning. Joys of being an insomniac most of the time. Try to go to sleep at regular times and basically lie there going, right, if I did this, I could make this, and then I could do this, and then I could do that. And you find that 4 hours later, you're still dead there thinking what else you could be doing. So, thought, may as well stay up and actually do it rather than just laying there thinking about it. Anybody else have any more questions? Yes?
Working with photographs and
Yes.
stuff like that, what issues are there about copyright?
Depending on whether if it's a photograph of somebody else's product, then you infringe on copyright law. If you're then wanting to mass produce it. If you're just wanting a single piece, that's what's called a garage kit, and that's okay. Because that's an individual contract between two people of, I can't make this, they don't make this, but I would like you to make it. So you're okay on that one. If somebody said, here's a picture of, say, a Space Marine, which Games Workshop produce, I would like you to reproduce it and then I'm going to put it into production, I would have to politely say no. Because it's not. That's, you're then taking their intellectual property, getting to use my skill to then rip off them, which they'll come chasing me as well as you. And I don't do that. I can do Games Workshop models for people, individual ones, of taken from an artwork, because that is them saying, I would like that model, Games Workshop don't make that model, as that picture, can you make it for me? Yes. That's a one-off, it's not being reproduced. So, it's very difficult with copyright law, you have to go very careful. I luckily have a very good solicitor who's one of my clients. And I get him to check my website regularly, and he goes, yes, you're okay on that, and change the word on that one. And I go, right, okay, no problem. But he said if ever I get an email from Games Workshop telling me to cease and desist, let him know because he'd like to take them on. Cool, I'm quite happy with that.
And he probably will.
It probably would, he's very good.
Most people do these days.
Yeah, he spends his days actually suing companies for health and safety. So he's pretty good on up together on his laws. But he's that mad of a modeler that he wanted a vulcanizer and bought himself one. Several £1,000s later, and half a garage missing, he has a vulcanizer. So he's starting his own
And did
lines and
divorce
stuff.
and never sees the children?
Yeah, I don't actually know if he's married. Never actually asked him. I always see him at conventions and he's there on his own going, yes, I need to talk to you about making me 30 of these. And he's got an historical one he wants me to do of about, I think it's 60 different types of archer he needs. So that's a long way off. He's got two or three sci-fi projects he wants to do
Sounds like a
first.
bad case of magic court.
Yes, he's apparently got all the pictures of the costumes, and then he's going to send me photographs of all the poses he wants, and then I've got to take those costumes and those poses and put them together. But he's got a load of sci-fi lizards he wants done first, because I made one, and he bought it and went, I'm going to put it in production. Can you make me another 30? Yeah. No problem. What designs do you want? Give me a minute, I'll work out what I want. Quite often end up with conversations like that at events. People go, I'd like 30 of this, but I'm not sure what I want yet. Can I get back to you? Yeah, no problem.
How long does it take you to produce, you know, 30 or something?
I can roughly whack out 20 models in 28 days from start to finish. That was my most busy month. Quite stressful towards the end of it. Thinking, am I actually going to finish all these on time? But did. I took on one job too many that month.
It's like it's not sleeping good properly.
Yes. And actually, when feeling that I'm falling asleep, putting the green stuff down before waking up and finding puffball skirts on models. Done that before, and it's not a pretty sight.
You ever considered if the opportunity arose to go to work for, say, the film industry, class and scene, make casts and things like that?
Turned it down twice. Well, many years ago, I was working at Games Workshop at the time, and a chap who worked on building the spaceships for Babylon 5, which they then took 3D renderings of, back to what we were talking about originally. He said, offered me a job, saying, would you like to come and make spaceships? I was like, that's really cool. What's the wages? And he said, well, you know, might get a job now which pays you 60,000, but then it might be another 8 months before you get another job. And unfortunately, the wife I had at the time would have blown the 60,000 in a month, and then we'd have nothing to live off of. So didn't take the job, unfortunately.
Artistic.
With the current wife, it would be fine, because she's actually really good and does really good budgeting, so she'd be like, yes, we can have so much here. But unfortunately, haven't had that offer again since. Twice in the 1 year he came and asked me, he said, really, you want to turn this down? I don't want to turn it down, but I've financially got to turn it down, which is a shame. But, you know, you live and learn. Yes, before you offend anyone. Anybody else got any questions?
Yeah, I've tried doing stuff with green stuff, and I know that it behaves differently at different times of year. It dries
Yes,
instantly in summer, and it
temperatures,
behaves like
humidity
wet
can
leather
affect
and-
it,
yeah.
and there's also, I say this to other sculptors and they look at me strange, there's different things that you can do during the different, through the different times. You've got that part when you first mix it up and it's really, really sticky.
Yeah.
That's the part for bulking out your areas and getting it to stick to where you want it. Within about 5 minutes of that, you've got your smoothing out time. Then it goes into where you can put really deep details in and that will hold. And then you've got the time where you can put really fine details in, which will level out a little bit and won't actually, and become more of a recess than a deep line into it. So it's definitely a case of playing with it and testing it, and if you get a chance to do lots of little test pieces, things like you can get 2 pieces of plastic card, put green stuff in the middle, stick it in a bench vise, and you get really nice flat sheets. And then you cut them out straight, and you can make straight bars. People are always amazed. You go, green stuff, straight bar, how did you do that? Oh, trade secret. Trade secret. It's lots of little things. It's like on some of my models, a lot of people comment on the tiny little teeth I do. I just deconstructed the jaw to be able to do it. Basically, I make the inside jaw and put dents in where all the teeth are going to go. And then roll really fine little sausages to a tapered point, stick them in, make the gum line, and when that's dry, put the outer lip around it, which seals the teeth in, so you get individual teeth, right?
Oh, wow.
And people are like, you can't do that with green stuff. Well, you can, it's
Look,
there.
the evidence.
It just takes some time and playing and a little bit of ingenuity and seeing how far you can push it.
Yeah.
And that's all my green stuffing is how far can I take this material and what can I do with it and how far can I push it?
Yeah.
And then listening to other sculptors. Mark Bedford, who works for Games Workshop, he works in their Forge Work department now. He gave me some great advice on bits and pieces. Don't use water to lubricate the sculpting tool, use bodily fluids instead. Use spit, and then if you want greasy, shiny, smooth, use the forehead sweat, and it actually makes it really shiny, smooth green stuff. And you tell people about it and they go, that's disgusting. And you go, yes I know, but it works. It's bizarre.
Well, it's got the natural oils.
It's got the natural oils. Whereas water has a tendency to evaporate into the air because of moisture vapor. And so you still find your tools sticky, whereas saliva and body sweat doesn't. So picking up tricks and listening to other people and never stop trying to learn more. People say, oh, you must be like master sculpting and you can't learn it. The day I can't learn anymore is the day I die, because you can always learn something new. Somebody else may have another way of doing something and you go, have you tried this? Oh, that sounds really cool. I wonder how far much further I can push that. And wanting to experiment that next bit on is definitely the key to this. You should be. I don't think there's a limit that anyone's really got to green stuff. There's always going to be something new that somebody else goes, I've tried this. Have you tried it yet? And you go, no, I haven't. Let's have a look at it, see what I can do with it.
Do you put it in the fridge or the freezer so that you can go off and have lunch?
No, just leave mine to natural air.
Okay.
If I'm really desperate, I'll stick it on top of the radiator. If I need to get it finished quickly. My fastest model has been 48 hours from start to finish. And that was for a client on the Kickstarter. He during the Kickstarter he's telling, oh, Dave's just finished this one, Dave's just finished this one. No, Dave finished those 6 months ago. But it sounds good as he's going through. The one that he didn't actually say, oh, Dave's just finished this one, or Dave only found out about this one Friday and sent me the pictures Monday. No, he didn't mention that one. But it was basically, they mentioned an alien in there which they hadn't made a model for. And everybody on the Kickstarter kept saying, can we have a model for this? Can we have a model for this? And in the end he went, Dave, I've got a picture. See how fast you can get it out. Can you get it done before the end of the Kickstarter? This was on the Friday, and the Kickstarter finished the following Friday. So I dropped all the other projects, worked out as fast as I could on this, and 48 hours later he had his photograph. I wouldn't try doing that on a regular basis.
On that note, it might be a good place to stop if we can.
Okay, no problem. Well, thank you very much for listening to my ramblings.